Hi everyone. It is time for our story, and today the vote was for Curious George Goes Camping. So that means tomorrow we will read this one, Morris Goes to School. Okay? So I'm going to flip the camera around, grab your snack, and get ready for this story. Curious George Goes Camping. Curious George was first written by Margaret and H.A. Ray. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. This weekend, George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, had special plans. They were going camping. Oh, that's fun. How many of you have gone camping before? At the campsite, the man with the yellow hat unpacked their gear while George looked at all the tents. He saw tents for big families or just the right size for a puppy. Oh, look there's a little pup tent. There were even tents on wheels. Would you like to help me put up our tent, George? The man asked. There he is, getting their tent ready. Oh, there's a lot of things here for George to look at, and we know he's very curious. George was happy to help. It would not be hard to set up a tent, he thought, but it wasn't easy. George, why don't you fill our bucket with water at the pump, his friend suggested. We'll need it by our campfire later when we roast marshmallows. Oh boy. Delicious. Who likes to have marshmallows on a campfire? I know I do. Marshmallows. George loved marshmallows. He couldn't wait to try them roasted. Now, don't wander off and get into trouble, the man warned. But George didn't hear him. He was already gone. Oh, do you see him? There he is. He already ran away. At the pump, George worked the handle up and down. Soon his bucket was full. On the way back down the trail, he saw a family packing up. George watched a girl pour her bucket of water on a campfire. The fire sizzled out. George thought that looked like fun. Uh-oh, what do you think George is going to do? He poured his bucket of water on the next campfire. Uh-oh. Hey, yelled the camper. We weren't finished with that yet. The camper began to chase George, but George didn't mean to cause trouble. No, he only wanted to hide. He ran into the forest as fast as he could, but the camper's footsteps followed close behind. George ran faster and faster. The footsteps came closer and closer until suddenly, oh no, what's going to happen? They were passing George. Why, it's not the camper chasing George now. It was a deer. What fun to run with a deer. Forgetting all about the camper and the marshmallows, George ran after the deer, but a little monkey cannot run as fast as a deer in the woods. Before long, guess what? George was lost and all alone. He felt tired and stopped to rest. At first he was worried. He was very far from camp. Do you know what you're supposed to do if you get lost in the woods? You're supposed to stay put. Okay, I'll go back to the story now. At first he was worried. He was very far from camp. But there were lots of other animals to keep him company. He saw a lizard sunning on a rock and a squirrel chattering in a tree. Then he saw the tail of a black and white kitty peeking out from underneath the bushes. He was curious. Would the kitty like to play? George gently pulled the kitty out. What do you think it is, everyone? It is not a kitty. It was a skunk, and it was scared. The skunk lifted its tail and sprayed. Psst! Whoo! The spray smelled awful. The animals tried to get away. George wanted to get away too, but he couldn't. The smell was all over him. Oh, stinky. How would he ever get rid of this awful smell, he wondered. Too bad he couldn't take a bath in the woods. I hope he finds some water. Aha! Then George had an idea. He could wash the smell off in the creek. George jumped into the cold water. He splashed and scrubbed, but he was still smelly. Blech! And now he was wet, too. Brrr. But what could he do? George thought and thought. If he could climb up a tree to dry off, would the smell blow away? Do you guys think that idea is going to work for George? Do you think a stinky skunk smell just blows away? No. Even dry and high up in a tree, George did not smell better. Poor George. He wished he hadn't wandered so far from camp. He wished he was roasting marshmallows with his friend. Suddenly, George heard footsteps heading towards him. Someone was coming. I wonder who it is. It was the forest animals. But they ran right by him. They had seen something scary, and George saw it too. It was a fire. George had gotten into trouble for putting out one fire, but this fire wasn't in a campground. This was an emergency. Quickly, George climbed down the tree and grabbed his bucket. He scooped it full of water in the creek. Then, being careful not to spill, he climbed back up and swung from branch to branch through the trees. Let's all say, "Go, George, go! Go, George, go!" When George got close enough to the fire, he reached down and poured the water on the flames. Out went the fire with a big hiss. Psh! Just then, George's friend rushed out of the forest with a ranger. "George," he called, "I was afraid you would be here." "It's a good thing you were here, George," the ranger said. "We saw smoke from the campground, but you put this fire out just in time." George was glad to help, and the man with the yellow hat was glad to see that George was safe, but he had a funny look on his face. "George," he asked, "what is that smell?" Back at the campsite, George's friend helped him get rid of the awful smell. After a strange bath in tomato juice, George smelled fine. Wow, that's a lot of tomato juice they got there. Then the man with the yellow hat invited the ranger to cook dinner with them over their own small campfire. "Fires can be nice if you're careful," said the ranger. "Oh, that looks like a fantastic bonfire." George agreed, especially for roasting marshmallows. The end. I hope that we all get a chance to have some lovely bonfires this summer. So I'll see you again tomorrow, and we're going to read Morris Goes to School. See you at 7. Have a good night, everybody.